The moment her 5-year-old daughter asked, "Mama, if we eat today, will we starve tomorrow?" the most dangerous man in the kingdom stopped dead in the crowded market. No one noticed the Alpha King standing frozen 12 feet behind them, except the mate bond that suddenly roared to life inside his chest, pulling him toward a starving widow and her twins with a force he couldn't ignore. What she doesn't know yet, what will change everything, is who he really is, and what his crown already took from her. Because some questions don't just break your heart, they can break a kingdom. The twins asked the question on a Tuesday, the cruelest day of the week, because the market vendors had already sold their bruised fruit, and the charitable ones had gone home. Sasha was crouched in the frost-stiffened mud behind the grain merchant's stall, scraping the last heel of black bread from the lining of her coat, when Lila tugged her sleeve with 2 small, chapped fingers. Little girl's golden curls bounced as she leaned in, like a bird pressing close for warmth. Her amber eyes were wide and serious. "Mama," Lila whispered, "if we eat today, will we starve tomorrow?" The bread was the size of Sasha's fist, which was not large. Leo, 4 minutes younger but always her quiet shadow, didn't ask. He simply pressed his small body tighter against Lila's side, one tiny hand fisting the hem of his sister's patched dress. Sasha's fingers stilled around the pitiful crust. 3 years of this. 3 years of splitting nothing into something, of smiling when her stomach gnawed at her spine, of promising herself tomorrow would be better even when she knew the Blight didn't care about promises. Her late husband Tomas had marched off to the king's border wars, saying he'd return with coin enough to fill their bellies forever. But the war had claimed him instead. She still woke some nights reaching for the empty side of the bed, heart aching, with a guilt that whispered she should have stopped him, should have found another way. She split the bread. 1 piece for Lila, 1 for Leo. Nothing for herself. "We eat today, my loves," Sasha said, keeping her voice light the way she always did. She brushed a curl from Lila's cheek. "And look, Leo, you get the bigger half because you carried the basket all the way here." Leo's little mouth curved the tiniest bit, the closest he ever came to a smile these days. Lila giggled, the sound bright and fleeting, and immediately broke her piece in half again, offering the larger chunk to her brother with both hands like it was the greatest treasure in Eldrath. "Share," she said proudly, as if she hadn't just given away half her only meal. Sasha's chest squeezed so hard she had to look away. She would walk through fire barefoot if it kept that giggle alive one more day. The market square of Veldra's lower quarter was emptying fast now, the last vendors packing and cursing the early cold. Sasha rose, brushing mud from her knees, and took each small hand in hers. She turned toward the narrow alley that led home to their 1-room loft above the old tannery. She didn't notice the tall shadow that had stopped 12 feet behind her, too broad and too still to belong to any merchant. She didn't know that Alpha King Stellan had come to the lower quarter in plain wool and a hooded cloak, precisely because his counselors kept lying about how bad the Blight had grown. He had walked these streets to see the truth with his own eyes. Now Stellan couldn't move. His wolf, silent for years under the weight of the Blight, stirred for the first time. And worse, something deeper pulled at him. A mate bond he had never felt, snapping awake at the sight of this exhausted woman and her starving twins. Stellan took 1 step forward before he could stop himself. Sasha still had no idea the most dangerous man in the kingdom was now following her home. The alley smelled of wet stone and old leather, the tannery's faint rot clinging to the air. Sasha kept her steps measured, 1 hand in Lila's, the other in Leo's, their small palms cold against hers. The twins walked close, shoulders brushing, the way they always did when the wind turned sharp, 2 halves of the same small animal seeking shelter. Behind them, Stellan kept his distance. He knew how to walk without being seen, boots soft on the uneven cobbles, cloak drawn low, hood shadowing his eyes. Every few paces the mate bond tugged, a low ache beneath his ribs, urging him closer. He fought it, not because he doubted what he felt, but because he knew what happened when kings descended on the lower quarter. People vanished. Questions were asked. He would not be the reason this woman's children learned to fear a stranger's shadow. She stopped at the narrow stair that climbed the side of the tannery building, a rickety thing of weathered boards and iron nails. Sasha lifted Lila, first, settling her on the third step so she could reach the latch, then turned for Leo. The boy hesitated, glancing back down the alley as though he sensed something watching. Sasha followed his gaze. Nothing but empty cobbles and the slow drip of melting frost from the eaves. "Come on, Leo," she murmured, lifting him. Leo wrapped his arms around her neck, cheek pressed to her shoulder. She carried him up the stairs, Lila already pushing the door open with both hands. The loft was one room, low-ceilinged, lit by the dying light that slipped through a single window. A narrow bed stood against one wall, a straw pallet against the other. A small hearth held the ghost of last night's fire. Above it hung a single iron pot and a drying rack strung with threadbare clothes. Sasha set Leo down and knelt to unlace his boots. "Stockings next. Don't want cold feet tonight." Lila was already tugging at her own laces, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. Stellan stood just outside the doorway, one hand braced on the frame, watching the small domestic ritual unfold. The mate bond hummed louder here, in the quiet warmth of their space. This was what home smelled like. This was what safety looked like. But he had no right to it. He cleared his throat. Sasha's head snapped up. She rose quickly, placing herself between the twins and the doorway. Her hand found the knife she kept tucked in her belt, small, worn, but hopefully sharp enough. "Who are you?" Her voice was steady, but the tremor in her fingers betrayed her. Stellan raised both palms slowly. "A traveler. I heard your daughter in the market. I couldn't walk away." Lila peeked around Sasha's leg, amber eyes bright with curiosity. "You're the tall man from the market. You were all quiet and still. Were you playing hide and seek?" Stellan's chest tightened at the delight in her voice. He lowered himself to one knee so his eyes met hers on the same level, cloak pooling softly on the worn floorboards. "Maybe I was," he said, the faintest smile touching his mouth. "But I think I wanted someone to find me." Lila beamed, clearly pleased by the answer. She took one small step out from behind her mother's skirt, still clutching the fabric like a tether. "I'm really good at hide and seek," she confided, "but Leo always giggles when he's supposed to be quiet." Leo, pressed against Sasha's other side, gave his sister a tiny frown. Sasha's pulse kicked harder. She had seen men use kindness like a key before. Her grip tightened on the knife at her belt. "Thank you, but we don't take charity." "I'm not offering charity." He reached into the satchel at his hip and drew out a small cloth bundle. "I'm offering food, for the children. You can search it first if you like." She studied him, the plain wool cloak too clean for these streets, the way he held himself like a man accustomed to command even when he tried to soften it. Those ocean blue eyes. She had seen them before, on faded papers nailed to tavern walls. Deserters, spies, men wanted for questioning after the border wars. But this one carried no threat in his posture, only a quiet intensity that made the hairs rise on her arms. "Show me, please," she said. He unfolded the cloth. Inside lay 2 small loaves, real bread, crust still warm, along with a wedge of hard cheese, a handful of dried apples, and a strip of smoked venison. The scent rolled into the room like a promise. Lila's stomach growled audibly. Leo's eyes widened, then flicked to his mother, waiting for permission. Sasha's throat worked. She could feel her twins' hunger like a second heartbeat. She hated that sound more than anything in the world. "Sit," she told the twins, nodding toward the pallet. "Boots off first." They scampered to the pallet, giggling as they tumbled onto the straw. Sasha took the bundle from Stellan's hand, careful not to let their fingers brush, and carried it to the small table. She broke the bread, divided the cheese, sliced the venison thin. The twins watched with wide eyes, not daring to reach until she set their portions in front of them. Lila took the tiniest bite, then immediately offered half to Leo. He shook his head, pushing it back toward her. They did this silent negotiation every meal, as though hunger were a game they could win by generosity. Stellan remained in the doorway. "May I come in?" Sasha glanced at the twins. Lila nodded so eagerly her curls flew like little golden springs. "Yes, come in," she chirped. Leo gave the tiniest nod, then patted the straw right beside him, a small, careful invitation. He stepped inside, ducking under the low beam. The room felt smaller with him in it, his presence filling the corners like smoke. He removed his hood, revealing thick blonde hair that fell just past his ears in a tousled wave, and a thin scar that curved along his jaw like a crescent moon. Sasha gestured to the single stool. "Sit if you like." He took it, long legs folding carefully. The twins ate, but their eyes kept drifting to him, curious. "What's your name?" Lila asked through a mouthful of bread, cheeks puffed like a chipmunk. He hesitated only a heartbeat. "Stellan." "I'm Lila. This is Leo." She pointed with her cheese. "He doesn't talk much, but he listens to everything." Leo's gaze flicked to Stellan, assessing. Then he looked at Sasha, a silent question. "He's safe," she said, though doubt still curled in her chest. As the fire went out, Sasha moved to the hearth, knelt, and began coaxing new flames from the last scraps of kindling. Her back was to Stellan, but she felt his eyes on her, steady, careful, like a man memorizing something he might never see again. "You're good with them," he said quietly. "They're easy to be good with." She fed a splinter of wood to the tiny blaze. "Most days." Lila finished her bread and licked each finger one by one with delighted little swipes of her tongue. "Do you have babies, Stellan?" she asked, voice bright and curious. "No." The word came out rougher than he intended. He cleared his throat. "Not yet." Leo tilted his head, studying him. Then, in the smallest voice Sasha had heard from him in months, he asked, "Do you get hungry?" Stellan's gaze softened, the hard lines of his face going gentle. "Every day, little one." Leo leaned forward, small hands clasped in his lap, and whispered, "Then next time, you can have some of mine." Sasha rose, brushing soot from her palms, her throat suddenly tight. "They need to sleep soon. It's been a long day." "Of course." Stellan stood. "I'll go." Lila's face fell. "Will you come back?" Stellan looked back at Sasha, waiting for her verdict. She weighed the food still on the table, the way the twins' shoulders had relaxed for the first time in weeks. She weighed the scar on his jaw and the way her own pulse had steadied the moment he stepped inside. "Tomorrow," she said softly. "If you'd like." Stellan's expression warmed. His gaze stayed on her, his blue eyes catching the firelight like deep summer water. "I'd like that very much. I'll bring more food, bread, cheese, whatever you'll let me share. No strings." He left as quietly as he had come, the door closing with a soft click. Sasha stood listening to his footsteps fade down the stairs, then crossed to the window and watched him disappear into the alley's shadows. She pressed her palm to the cool glass, breath fogging the pain for a heartbeat. That was when she saw it. A single faint green shoot, no thicker than a needle, pushing through a hairline crack in the windowsill where no seed had ever fallen. It trembled slightly in the draft, its tiny leaf unfurling like a secret waking up. Her fingers stilled on the glass. Just then, Lila yawned, then snuggled into her thin, lumpy pillow with a happy little sigh. "He smells like the forest." Leo nodded solemnly. And pine trees and adventures. Sasha turned from the window, throat tight, and tucked them into the narrow bed, pulling the thin blanket high. She kissed their foreheads, lingering over each small face. Sleep, my loves. Tomorrow will be kinder. She didn't believe it, not entirely, but tonight, for the first time in years, the words didn't taste like a lie. She sat by the dying fire long after the twins' breathing evened out. The bread wrapper still lay on the table, faintly warm. She traced the weave of the cloth with one finger, remembering the way Stellan's hand had brushed hers when he passed it over. Accidental, careful, but electric. She told herself it was only gratitude. She told herself the calm that had settled over her was only relief at a full belly and a warm hearth. But when she finally lay down beside her sleeping children, she pressed her face into the crook of her elbow and let herself remember what it felt like to want something more than survival. Outside, in the cold dark of the alley, Stellan leaned against the tannery wall and closed his eyes. The mate bond thrummed steadily now, a low drumbeat beneath his skin. He could still smell her, wood smoke and wool and the faint sweetness of the twins' hair. He could still see the way she had placed herself between him and her children, knife in hand, chin lifted. He had come to the lower quarter to see the truth of his kingdom. He had never expected the truth to look like her. The next morning he returned with more bread, a small jar of honey, and a length of sturdy twine. Sasha opened the door before he could knock, the twins already crowding her legs. Lila threw her arms around his knees, cheek pressed to his thigh like he was a tree she'd claimed. Leo hung back a step, then stepped forward and held out the core of yesterday's apple, half-eaten, sticky, offered like a treasure. Stellan knelt, accepted the apple core with grave seriousness, and tucked it into his pocket. Thank you, Leo. I'll keep it safe. Stellan stayed longer each day. He fixed the loose floorboard so Lila could chase shadows without stumbling. He sat cross-legged on the pallet with Leo, guiding small fingers through the loops of a sailor's knot until the boy's first successful bowline earned a quiet, proud, "Look, Mama," before holding it up for Stellan to assess. Stellan took it gently, turning it in his hands. Perfect. He met Leo's gaze. You're going to be better at this than I ever was. Leo's mouth curved, the smallest, shyest smile Sasha had seen in years. He leaned forward and rested his forehead against Stellan's shoulder for one heartbeat, then pulled back, cheeks flushed. Sasha's throat closed. She turned away to stir the thin stew on the hearth, blinking hard against the sudden sting. Thomas had never had time to teach Leo knots. Thomas had never come home. One afternoon, Lila perched on Stellan's knee, braiding 3 clumsy strands of his blonde hair while she narrated the sky. See that cloud? It's a dragon sleeping, but if you whisper, it might wake up and bring rain. Sasha watched from the corner, pretending to mend a tear in Leo's shirt, but she noticed everything. The way Stellan's shoulders dropped their tension when Lila laughed, the careful way he moved around her space like he was afraid of breaking something fragile, the brief, burning glances that caught her when he thought she wasn't looking. That evening, after the twins fell asleep early, exhausted from a day of running circles around Stellan, he lingered at the table longer than usual. The fire had burned low, casting long shadows across the room. Sasha sat across from him at the small table. You've brought enough food to last us a season, she said quietly. Bread, honey, meat, fruit. I don't know how to repay that. Stellan looked at her, eyes steady in the firelight. You don't owe me anything, Sasha. I come because I want to, because being here quiets something in me that's been loud for too long. Her breath caught. She glanced at the cupboard again, the shelves fuller than they'd been in years, then back to him. And what happens when you stop wanting to? He leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table. I don't think that day comes. The words settled between them, quiet and heavy. Sasha looked at the fire for a long moment, watching embers pulse like slow heartbeats. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost careful. My husband, Thomas. He died in the border wars. Fever took him 3 weeks after the last battle. He wrote me once, said the king's orders were clear, hold the line or lose everything. So he held, but he lost. Stellan went very still. His hand flattened on the table, knuckles whitening. I'm sorry. She searched his face. The faint scar, along his jaw, the ocean blue of his eyes that seemed darker now. You sound like you mean it. I do. His voice cracked, just at the edge. I lost people too. My parents. Gone in one night, what everyone called an accident. I told myself grief ends if you keep moving. It doesn't. It just gets quieter until something reminds you what warmth feels like. You carry it, she said softly. Every day. Every hour. He met her eyes, unflinching. I came to the lower quarter to see what the kingdom had become. I didn't expect to find this. He gestured at the sleeping twins curled together under the patched blanket, at the space between their hands on the table. A place that's full of love instead of strategy. Here, I can breathe again. Sasha's throat closed. She felt it too. The pull, stronger now, a warm current running beneath her skin whenever he was near. It wasn't just calm anymore. It was heat, low and insistent, pooling in her chest, her wrists, the hollow of her throat. Guilt twisted sharp in her gut. Thomas had been her first everything. Childhood sweetheart, quiet promises made under an old oak tree, a love steady and familiar as breathing. Safe. This was different. Fiercer. Unexpected. If she were being honest, this was the first time that her body had remembered how to want, and the betrayal of it burned even as the want itself bloomed. Part of her wanted to reach across the table and trace the scar on his jaw. The other part wanted to run far away from him. What are you hiding, Stellan? She whispered. He looked down at his hands. Enough that if you knew, you might send me away, and I'm not ready for that. The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. Outside, the wind rattled the patched window, but inside the room felt sealed, private, alive with possibility and peril. Sasha stood first. It's late. He rose too, towering but careful, close enough now that she could smell pine and smoke on his skin. I'll be back tomorrow. She nodded, pulse loud in her ears. At the door, he paused, hand on the latch. Sasha. She looked up. He stepped closer, just one step, and for a heartbeat neither moved. The space between them hummed, electric. Then he lifted his hand slowly, brushed a stray curl from her temple, thumb grazing her cheekbone. It was a feather-light touch, but she felt it everywhere. Thank you for letting me stay. He was gone before she could answer. She crossed to the window, pressed her palm to the glass, and watched his silhouette melt into the alley shadows. The green shoot on the sill had grown, its second leaf now fully open, trembling as though listening. She did not see that in the deeper shadows of the alley, where no lantern reached, a cloaked figure slipped away, hood drawn low. The palace of Eldrath rose from the upper quarter like a blade of white stone, its towers piercing the gray sky. Lady Sereth stood at the highest window of her private chambers, gloved fingers resting on the cold sill, watching the city below as though it were a chessboard. She was tall, sharp-featured, with hair the color of midnight pulled into a knot at her nape. Her gown was black velvet edged in silver thread, elegant, but not ostentatious. She did not need ostentation. Power, when wielded correctly, spoke quietly. There was a soft knock at the door. Enter. The cloaked figure from the alley stepped inside, hood already lowered. A lean woman, eyes the color of slate. One of Sereth's personal watchers, trained to see what others missed. "Well?" The watcher spoke in a low murmur. "He returns to the lower quarter every day, the same loft above the tannery. The woman is called Sasha, widow, 2 children, twins, 5 years old, golden curls, amber eyes. The man kneels for them. He brings food. He fixes things. He stays longer each time." Sereth's lips curved. "And the children? They trust him. The woman watches him like she's waiting for the knife to appear, but she lets him in." Sereth turned then, eyes narrowing. "And the room itself?" "The shelves look full, more than a widow should have, and there is green, a chute in the windowsill. It was not there before he began coming." Sereth crossed the room in 3 measured steps, stopping before a low table where a silver bowl sat filled with dark liquid that did not reflect light. She dipped one finger, watching as the surface rippled. She had fed the blight for years, carefully, precisely, through rituals of blood and intent, drawing the land's vitality into herself to keep the kingdom desperate, dependent on her. The green chute was a crack in that careful structure. She withdrew her finger, wiping it on a silk cloth. "He is bonding with them, the mate bond. I can feel it even here, faint, but growing." The watcher waited. Sereth's voice dropped to a velvet blade. "You know what you have to do." The watcher bowed. "And the woman? Leave her alive. Broken is more useful than dead. She will come to him begging, and he will come to me." The door closed softly behind the watcher. Sereth returned to the silver bowl. She pricked her thumb with a small silver blade, let 3 drops fall into the liquid. The surface shimmered, then cleared, showing her a faint image. Stellan laughing, actually laughing, as a small golden-haired girl braided his hair. Sereth's expression did not change, but her hand tightened on the blade until the silver bit into her palm. In the loft above the tannery, night had fallen thick and cold, but the room felt warmer than it had in years. Sasha moved quietly through the familiar dark, stepping over the board Stellan had fixed so it no longer creaked. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she wasn't counting the days until the food ran out. The twins had gone to bed with full bellies and sleepy smiles, giggling about how Stellan had let Lila braid his hair into dragon horns. She paused at the foot of the narrow bed, watching them. Lila and Leo lay curled together under the thin blanket like 2 halves of one small heart. Lila had thrown one protective arm over her brother's chest. Their breathing was soft, even, the most beautiful sound Sasha had ever known. She leaned down and brushed a curl from Lila's cheek, then pressed the lightest kiss to Leo's forehead. "I'll just empty the ash bucket," she whispered, smiling softly. "I'll be right back, my loves." She slipped outside, moving quietly down the rickety stairs with the small bucket in hand. The night air bit at her cheeks. She dumped the ash at the edge of the alley, taking a moment to breathe in the cold, grateful for the full cupboards, the fixed floorboard, the way Stellan's presence had begun to feel like something she could almost trust. It took her no more than 3 minutes, but when she climbed back, up and pushed open the door, the room had changed. The bed was empty. The blanket lay crumpled and half-dragged toward the edge of the pallet. Lila's small patched shoe had fallen beside it, laces still neatly tied. Leo's half-eaten apple core rolled slowly across the worn boards and came to a gentle stop against the toe of her boot. Sasha froze in the doorway, the empty bucket slipping from her fingers and clattering to the floor. For one frozen second, her mind refused to understand what her eyes were seeing. Then she stumbled across the room and dropped to her knees so hard the impact jarred her bones. Her hands shook violently as she touched the straw where their small bodies had been only moments ago. It was still warm. A raw, guttural sound tore from her throat, nothing like a human voice. She pressed her face into the pallet, inhaling desperately, as if she could pull them back through scent alone. Her fingers clutched the blanket so tightly the fabric tore. She choked out, voice cracking. She staggered upright, lunging for the door. It hung slightly open, the latch undamaged. No overturned furniture, no signs of struggle. They had been taken so quietly, so carefully, that her children hadn't even woken up. On the small table, beneath the jar of honey Stellan had brought that morning, lay a single folded parchment sealed with black wax. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal. The script was elegant, precise. Bring the king to the old watchtower at the forest's edge by dawn. Come alone. Tell no one. The children are unharmed, for now. Fail, and they will feed the dark. No signature, only a symbol pressed into the wax, a thorned rose. Sasha stared at the note until the words blurred. Then her legs gave out. She slid down the wall, the parchment crumpling in her fist, and pressed her forehead to her knees as the first sob ripped through her. Deep, wrenching. For several long moments she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only clutch the note and rock helplessly. Then something fiercer than grief rose inside her. She pushed herself up on shaking legs, wiped her face with the back of her sleeve, and moved with sudden, desperate purpose. She pulled on her coat and took the knife from her belt. She kissed the empty pillow where Lila's head had rested, kissed the hollow where Leo had curled, and whispered, "I'm coming." Then she ran into the night. In the palace, Stellan stood before the great hearth in his private chambers, staring into flames that did not warm him. The mate bond thrummed steadily beneath his ribs, a constant aching pull that made every breath feel incomplete. He had left the lower quarter only an hour earlier, telling himself it was safer for Sasha and the twins if he wasn't seen lingering too long. But distance had done nothing to quiet the bond. If anything, it had grown louder. He had come back to the palace only because duty demanded it. One more night of playing the distant king. A sharp, urgent knock shattered the silence. Lady Sareth stepped inside without waiting for permission, the heavy door clicking shut behind her. She wore black velvet, a thin band of silver at her throat catching the glow like a blade. Her expression was perfectly composed. "Your Majesty, a word," she said. He turned slowly. "Sareth." She crossed the room with measured grace. "You have been absent from council. Again. I had business in the lower quarter." "Business?" She tilted her head, a ghost of a smile playing at her lips. "With a widow and her 2 small children, I hear. How touching." Stellan went very still. The mate bond flared hot beneath his skin. "You've been watching me." "I watch everything that threatens the stability of the crown." She stepped closer. "The council grows restless. The blight worsens by the day. They look to you for answers, for strength, for a queen who can help you rule." "I will choose my own queen." Sareth's smile thinned. "And if your choice is unwise, if it endangers the entire realm?" He met her gaze without flinching. "Speak plainly." She reached into her sleeve and withdrew a small locket. With deliberate care, she opened it. Inside, nestled on black velvet, lay a single golden curl. Stellan's blood turned to ice. "They are safe," Sareth said softly. "For now. Bring yourself to the old watchtower at the forest's edge by dawn. Come alone. Tell no one." He lunged forward without thinking. Sareth raised one elegant hand. Shadows, thick living tendrils, coiled around her fingers like smoke. "Careful, my king. Harm me, and you will never find them in time." Stellan stopped inches from her, chest heaving, every instinct screaming to tear her apart. But the image of Lila's bright laugh and Leo's quiet, trusting eyes held him back. "You will not touch them," he growled. Sareth's smile never wavered. "Then come, alone." She turned and left as silently as she had come, the door closing behind her with a soft, final click. Stellan reached for his cloak. Sword. The small dagger he kept hidden at his spine. He stepped into the corridor and into the night, running toward the lower quarter as though the devil himself chased him. Toward her. Sasha reached the loft door just as Stellan rounded the corner of the alley. Moonlight caught his blonde hair, his eyes wide with the same raw terror clawing through her chest. She froze at the sight of him. He stopped short, breath ragged. Sasha. She thrust the note toward him with a trembling hand. They took them. They left this. He closed the distance and took the parchment from her. As he read, the color drained from his face. Sasha's voice cracked. They called you king. He closed his eyes for one agonizing second. When he opened them, the man standing before her was no longer the gentle stranger who had knelt for her children. He was something far more dangerous. I am, he said quietly. Alpha King Stellan of Eldrath. The words hit her like a punch. Sasha stumbled back until her shoulders hit the doorframe. Her stomach twisted violently. This was the man whose orders had sent Thomas marching to his death. This was the man who had sat at her table, fixed her floor, braided her daughter's hair, all while wearing a crown that had cost her everything. And yet, her traitorous body still reacted. The mate bond surged at his nearness, flooding her with unwanted warmth that made her pulse flutter at her throat. She hated it. She hated how right his scent still felt. She hated herself most of all for the way her fingers itched to reach for him even now. You knew, she whispered, voice breaking. All this time. You knew what happened to Thomas, to us, and you still let me look at you like you could be mine. Stellan's face crumpled with pain. I'm sorry, he said again, the words raw and desperate. I swear to every god listening, I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to tell you without losing this. He gestured helplessly at the small, quiet room that had begun to feel like home. I came here to see the truth of my kingdom, but I stayed because of you, because of them, because for the first time in years I felt something other than guilt and emptiness. I was a coward. I know that now. A broken laugh tore from her throat. Guilt? You signed the orders that killed my husband. You let me want you. You let me dream. Her voice fractured completely. Tears burned hot tracks down her cheeks as the betrayal sank deeper. He took one careful step closer, hands raised in surrender, eyes glistening. I never lied about what I felt, the pull, the bond. It has not quieted since I saw you at the market. I hid who I was because I was terrified you would send me away. His voice cracked. But I swear, Sasha, every moment I spent with you was real. I would give up the crown if it meant undoing the pain I caused you. She stared at him through the blur of tears, chest heaving. Her mind screamed the truth she could no longer deny. She could never be with this man. Not truly. Not after what his crown had taken from her. The thought lodged in her heart like a stone. They have my children, she said, voice raw and hollow. I know. His own voice broke. And I will tear the world apart to bring them back to you. Let me help, please. She let him take her hand, fingers cold and trembling in his warm grip. He pressed her palm flat against his chest, right over the frantic, guilty beat of his heart. I swear on my life, he whispered, rough and ragged. I will bring them home, both of them. And then, if you never want to see me again, I will disappear. But right now, let me fix this, please. She searched his face, those ocean blue eyes steady despite the storm in them, his scar stark in the moonlight. She nodded, once, sharp and decisive. Then we go. Now. He pulled her cloak tighter around her shoulders with gentle, trembling hands. They stepped into the night, king and widow, bound by grief, by a bond neither of them had asked for, and by two small children who had asked the wrong question on the wrong day. Behind them, the green chute on the windowsill trembled once more, and in the distance, the old watchtower waited, its thorned rose ready to bloom in blood. The night air was bitter and sharp as they ran, the cobbles slick beneath their boots. Sasha's breath came in harsh bursts, each one burning her lungs. Stellan stayed close, one hand hovering near the small of her back, not touching, but ready to catch her. They moved through the lower quarter like shadows, slipping between alleys and under hanging laundry lines that slapped against their shoulders. The city gave way to the wild edge where the blight had clawed deepest, trees twisted black, ground spongy with rot. The old watchtower rose ahead, a crumbling finger of stone against the moonlit sky, its base swallowed by the forest. Stellan slowed as they neared the tree line, pulling Sasha behind the thick trunk of a dead oak. His hand finally settled on her waist, steadying her. The contact sent another unwanted spark through her. "Stay close," he murmured, voice low and protective, lips near her ear. "If anything happens to me, run. Do not look back." She turned her face to his, close enough to see the regret carved into every line of his expression. "I'm not leaving without my children." His eyes darkened. "I know. If I fall, you must live for them." He brushed a stray lock of hair from her temple. "I would give anything to undo the pain I caused you, Sasha. Anything." She swallowed hard, the betrayal still a knife in her chest. "Then don't fall." A low growl rumbled from his throat, half wolf, half man. He pressed his forehead to hers for one heartbeat, breathing her in. They moved again, silent as predators. The first ambush came without warning. Shadows detached from the trees, 4 figures in dark leathers, blades glinting. Sereth's elite guards, faces painted with streaks of ash to blend with the blight. Stellan shoved Sasha behind him and shifted in a blur. Fur the color of pale gold rippled over muscle, bones cracking and reshaping into something massive and lethal. The wolf that landed on all 4s was enormous, shoulders level with her chest, blue eyes blazing with fury. He roared, the sound shaking leaves from the branches. The fight exploded. Steel met fang. One guard lunged at Stellan's flank. He twisted with terrifying grace and closed his jaws around the man's arm. Bones snapped. A scream cut short. Sasha drew her knife, heart hammering, but another guard broke past Stellan and came for her. She dodged, the blade whistling past her cheek. Panic surged, not for herself, but for the twins somewhere inside that tower. The high ground beneath her feet trembled. Vines, thin, black-veined things, stirred in the dirt, responding to the spike of her fear. She didn't question it. She grabbed the nearest vine and yanked. It surged upward like a living whip, wrapping around the guard's ankle and yanking him off his feet. Stellan's wolf snarled approval, eyes flicking to her with fierce pride before he tore into the remaining attackers. They fought their way forward, step by bloody step. Sasha's hands grew slick with sap and blood. Every time terror for her children spiked, the earth answered, roots bursting from the ground to trip enemies, thorny vines lashing out like serpents. The magic felt ancient, instinctive, as if the land itself had been waiting for a mother's rage to wake it. They reached the base of the tower, breathing hard. Stellan shifted back mid-stride, streaked with blood, but already reaching for the cloak she tossed him. He pulled her close for one brief, grounding moment, his hand cupping the back of her neck. "You were magnificent," he whispered against her hair, voice rough with awe and something deeper. She pulled away. "My children first." The tower door hung open like a wound. Inside, torchlight flickered over crumbling stone. At the center of the circular chamber, Sereth stood within a ritual circle etched in blood and ash. Lila and Leo knelt on opposite sides of the glowing sigil, silver chains biting into their small wrists. Lila's lip was split. A bruise was already blooming across her cheek. Leo's shoulders shook with silent sobs, but he kept twisting his body as far as the chains allowed, trying to shield his sister even though he was smaller. Sareth stood at the center, beautiful and terrible, shadows writhing around her like living smoke. Lila leaned forward as far as her chains would let her, her golden curls matted with sweat and dirt. Her voice came out small but fierce, cracking on every other word. "Take me instead," she whispered to Sareth, tears streaming down her face. "Please! Leo's scared. He doesn't like the dark. Take me. I'm older." Leo's head snapped toward her, eyes wide with horror. "No, Lila, don't!" He lunged against his chains, the silver links cutting into his wrists until fresh blood welled. Lila turned to him, her eyes shining with tears. Her lower lip trembled, but her voice stayed brave. "It's okay, Leo. I'm not scared. You're my best friend. If one of us has to go, it should be me. You can tell Mama I was brave, okay? Tell her I didn't cry." Leo's face crumpled. A sob tore out of him, high and broken. "I don't want you to go. I don't want to be alone. Lila, please don't leave me." He strained against the chains until his small arms bled, trying desperately to reach her. Lila stretched her fingers toward him too, the tips just barely brushing. Their hands met for one fleeting second, sticky with blood and tears. And for that single heartbeat, the glowing sigil dimmed. Outside the tower, Sasha and Stellan heard the sobs before they even reached the door. Two small voices, raw with terror and love, calling each other's names in the dark. They burst inside. Lila's eyes found Sasha first. "Mama!" The word cracked with relief so pure it hurt. Sareth turned slowly, shadows writhing around her. Power rolled off her in waves, thick, suffocating, far stronger than they had expected. Her eyes gleamed with triumph. "You brought your knight in shining armor, Sasha," she said, voice silky. "How touching. But you're too late. The ritual is almost complete." Stellan stepped forward, every line of his body radiating lethal calm. "Release them. Now." Sareth laughed, low and melodic. "Not yet. The ritual needs royal blood and innocent hearts. These two will bind the blight to me forever. The land will wither, and I will rise." Sareth's smile sharpened. She raised a hand, and shadows thickened, around the circle like a living cage. The air grew heavy, suffocating. The twins' small bodies began to glow faintly, their eyes rolled back. Sasha felt the pull in her own chest, the magic trying to tear something vital from her children. A scream tore from her throat. She and Stellan charged. Stellan shifted in a blur of moonlight and fury, golden wolf crashing into the first wave of guards. Claws raked, jaws snapped. Sasha fought beside him, knife flashing in one hand, the other outstretched. Every spike of terror for her children made the earth answer, vines erupting from cracks in the stone floor, wrapping around legs, strangling arms, yanking men down with brutal force. Sareth was stronger than they had anticipated. She moved like liquid shadow, chanting faster, her voice weaving through the mayhem. Dark tendrils lashed out, slamming Stellan's wolf against the wall hard enough to crack stone. One tendril caught Sasha across the ribs, sending her staggering. Pain bloomed hot and sharp, but she kept moving, vines surging in response to her fury. One guard rushed forward and raised a sword toward Leo. Sasha screamed. A thick root burst from the ground and impaled the man through the chest with a wet crunch. Sareth seized the opening. She slashed her own palm and flung the blood toward the twins. The sigil flared crimson, brighter than before. The pull on the children intensified. Lila cried out in pain, small body arching. Leo whimpered, tears streaming. Lila reached for her brother again, fingers stretching desperately across the circle. "Hold on, Leo. Mama's here." But Sareth was relentless. She stepped closer to the circle, shadows coiling thicker, her power pressing down like a physical weight. The twins' glow began to flicker, dimming as the ritual drained them. Sasha threw herself forward with a cry. Vines exploded around her, thicker and wilder than before, fueled by pure maternal rage. They slammed into Sereth's circle, cracking the etched stone. Stellan roared and charged Sereth directly, colliding with her in a savage tangle of fang and shadow. They rolled across the floor, claws raking, shadows lashing like black whips. Sereth laughed even as blood welled from gashes in her arms, her power feeding on the violence. In the chaos, one of Sereth's remaining guards broke through and lunged at Lila with a dagger raised. Leo saw it first. With a cry that was half sob, half roar, the little boy threw himself forward as far as his chains allowed. His small body collided with Lila's. The guard's dagger came down, but Leo twisted at the last second, taking the shallow cut across his own shoulder instead of letting it reach his sister. Blood welled hot and bright. Leo gasped in pain but didn't let go. He clung to Lila, tiny arms wrapped around her as tightly as he could. "I've got you," he whispered through gritted teeth, voice shaking but fierce. Lila sobbed, burying her face in his neck. "Leo, you're bleeding." "I'm okay," he said, even as tears poured down his cheeks. "I protect you." The mate bond flared suddenly, bright, golden, connecting all four of them in a rush of warmth and power. Stellan's wolf howled, the sound vibrating through the stone. Sasha felt it in her bones, her earth magic, his alpha strength, the twins' pure, innocent faith weaving together into something unstoppable. Vines surged from every crack in the floor and walls now, thicker than ropes, wrapping around Sereth's limbs and pinning her in place. She snarled, her shadows lashing wildly, but the combined power was too much, even for her. Stellan shifted back to human form and drove his dagger straight into Sereth's chest with a roar of pure, protective rage. Sereth's eyes widened in shock. Shadows writhed once, twice, then dissolved into nothing. She crumpled to the floor, the light leaving her eyes as her body hit the stone with a final hollow thud. The ritual circle shattered with a sound like breaking glass. The silver chains on the twins fell away. Sasha dropped to her knees between them, hands shaking as she gathered them both into her arms. She pressed frantic kisses to their hair, their tear-streaked cheeks, their small, trembling hands. "My babies," she sobbed, voice breaking. "My brave, perfect babies. Mama's here." Lila burrowed into her chest with a hiccuping sob. Leo pressed his forehead to Sasha's shoulder, his wounded arm hanging limp, but his grip on her sleeve fierce. "You came," he whispered, voice small and odd. "You both came." Stellan dropped to his knees beside them, blood streaking his skin, eyes wet. He wrapped his arms around all three of them. Lila turned her face into his chest, breathing him in. Leo looked up at him, pain and something brighter mixing in his amber eyes. "I saved Lila," he said softly, voice trembling with exhaustion, but carrying a quiet pride he had never shown before, like a brother should. Stellan's breath caught. For a moment he simply stared at the small boy, the same shy child who rarely spoke above a whisper, now sitting taller despite the wound on his shoulder and the tears still drying on his cheeks. "You did, Leo," Stellan whispered, voice rough and thick with emotion. He pressed a gentle kiss to the top of Leo's head, then Lila's. "You were both so brave. I'm so proud of you." Leo's small chest lifted a fraction, a tiny spark of confidence settling into his shoulders. Even through the pain, he managed a bright smile. Sasha met Stellan's gaze over their heads. The betrayal still ached, sharp and deep in her chest. But in this moment, with her children safe and breathing in their arms, she allowed herself one fragile, trembling truth. She was grateful he was here. The tower groaned as the last of Sereth's magic unraveled. Outside, The first faint green shoots pushed through the blighted earth, tiny and defiant, reaching for the moonlight. They rose together, king, widow, and two small survivors, and walked out into the night that was already beginning to breathe again. Stellan returned the twins to the loft himself, carrying a sleeping Leo, while Sasha held Lila close to her chest. He helped her settle them into bed, then stepped back to the doorway, eyes heavy with everything he wanted to say but wouldn't. "I'll have guards posted discreetly," he said softly. "Only until we're certain every trace of Sereth's allies is gone. You won't see them. And I won't come unless you ask." Sasha stood in the middle of the small room, arms wrapped around herself, still smelling blood and pine and the faint copper of Leo's bandaged wound. She nodded once, unable to speak. He lingered a moment longer, gaze tracing her face like he was memorizing it in case she never let him return. Then he bowed, not as a king, but as a man who knew he had caused pain, and left. For 3 full moons, he kept his distance. Supplies arrived every week: food, blankets, warm clothes for the children, herbs for Leo's healing shoulder. Never with a note, never with his name, just quiet proof that he was thinking of them. Sasha told herself she was relieved. She told herself the ache in her chest was only exhaustion. But every night she dreamed of ocean blue eyes and gentle hands braiding golden curls. Leo's shoulder healed slowly. The scar was thin and silver, but he carried it like a medal. One warm afternoon in early summer, Sasha found him outside the tannery, patiently teaching a group of younger children how to tie the same sailor's knot Stellan had shown him. His voice was still quiet, but there was a new steadiness in it. "See? Pull tight, but not too tight," he told a little girl. "That's how you keep something safe." When he caught Sasha watching, he gave her a big smile, and something in her heart unclenched. Her quiet boy stood a little taller now. He had saved his sister. He knew his own strength. One evening, Sasha walked in to find Lila flopped across the pallet, arms crossed and lower lip jutting out. "Leo says it's my fault Stellan stopped coming," she announced, voice wobbling with righteous indignation. "He says I'm too loud and scared him away like the big noisy crows." Leo sat beside her, ears pink, looking equal parts guilty and defensive. "I didn't say it was your fault. I said maybe we were too loud. And you did sing the dragon song at the top of your lungs right when he was trying to fix the roof." Lila sat up like a spring. "The dragon song is beautiful. He liked it. He laughed." "He laughed once," Leo muttered. "But then he stopped coming. So maybe we did something wrong." Sasha leaned against the doorframe, throat tight. The worry in their small voice cracked something deep inside her chest. She crossed the room, sank onto the pallet, and pulled both of them into her arms, burying her face in their sweet-smelling hair. "Oh, my loves," she whispered. "You did nothing wrong. Sometimes grown-ups need time to figure things out, but that doesn't mean they stop caring." Lila sniffled against her shoulder. "So he's not mad at my dragon song?" "Not even a little," Sasha promised, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Both twins relaxed against her, the fight draining out of them as quickly as it had come. Within minutes they were giggling again, Lila demonstrating her very loud dragon song while Leo tried to shush her. Sasha held them close and laughed, a real, soft, surprise laugh that felt like the first true breath she'd taken in months. Summer turned to autumn, then winter. Stellan still stayed away. But one crisp morning, a single white rose appeared on her windowsill beside the now flourishing green vine. Sasha stared at it for a long time, thumb brushing the soft petals. Then she carried it inside and placed it in a cracked clay cup on the table. The first time she saw him again was in the market on the first warm day of spring. She was buying flour, paying with coins Stellan's discreet messengers had left, when she felt that familiar pull, She turned. Stellan stood several stalls away, dressed in plain clothes, hood lowered. He wasn't approaching. He was simply watching her with quiet, patient eyes, as if content to stand at a distance for the rest of his life if that was what she needed. Their gazes locked. Something in Sasha's chest cracked open. Not pain this time, but the slow thaw of winter ground. She took one step toward him, then another. When she stopped an arm's length away, he spoke first, voice low and rough with months of unspoken longing. "I miss the sound of your voice," he said simply. "I missed watching Leo tie knots and hearing Lila tell stories about clouds. I missed you, but I promised I would give you space. So I stayed away." Sasha's throat tightened. "I needed the space," she admitted. "I needed time to breathe without feeling like I was betraying Thomas every time I looked at you." He nodded, pain flickering across his face, but he didn't look away. "I know, and I will never ask you to forget him. He was part of you. He gave you Lila and Leo. I only want the chance to prove that I can be here without taking anything away from what you had." She studied him, the man who had knelt in the dirt for her children, who had given her space, who still looked at her like she was the only light in his world. "I'm not ready for everything," she said quietly, "but you should come by again." The smile that broke across his face was small, tentative, and so full of relief it made her chest ache. "Slowly," he agreed, "as slow as you need." He offered his hand, palm up, just an open door. After a long moment, Sasha placed her hand in his. Spring turned into summer. They spent more time together, but never rushed. Stellan never pushed. He listened when she spoke of Thomas. He sat quietly while she cried on the anniversary of her husband's death. He brought small gifts for the twins and left without expecting anything in return. One golden afternoon in the palace gardens, Leo stood in the grass with Stellan, trying to coax his first partial shift. The boy's ears had already lengthened into soft golden wolf ears that twitched nervously. "I can't do it," Leo muttered, frustrated. "I'm stuck." Stellan knelt to his level, voice gentle and patient. "Don't force it. Breathe with it. Your wolf isn't something separate. It's part of you, like how you know when Lila's about to cry before she does." Leo glanced at his sister, who was watching with wide eyes. He took a shaky breath. His ears flickered, then fully formed, soft, golden, and twitching. A tiny tail even sprouted for a second before vanishing again. Leo's face lit up with quiet wonder. "I did it." "You did," Stellan said, pride warm in his voice. He ruffled Leo's hair gently. "And you'll get even better. I'm proud of you, Leo." Lila clapped her hands. "My turn next, but mine will have spots." Leo rolled his eyes, but he was smiling. "You can't have spots. Wolves don't have spots." "They do if I say so." Sasha watched from the garden bench, heart full. They were fighting again, in the most ordinary, wonderful way. It meant they were healing. It meant they were home. 1 year after the market day that started everything, spring had returned in full force. The same grain stall stood in the lower quarter, but now it overflowed with fresh bread, honey cakes, and baskets of early berries. Sasha stood behind it with Stellan at her side, his arm loosely around her waist. Lila and Leo, healthy, sun-kissed, and laughing, moved through the crowd handing out warm rolls to other children. Lila skipped back to the stall, curls bouncing, and looked up at her mother. "Mama, if we eat today, will we have enough to share tomorrow?" Sasha felt tears prick her eyes, happy ones this time. She looked at Stellan, at the man who had given her children full bellies and safe nights, who had waited patiently while she healed, who still looked at her every morning like she was the miracle he never expected to find. She smiled through the tears, reached up to touch his cheek, and answered softly, "Yes, love. We will always have enough to share." Stellan leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her temple, then rested his forehead against hers for a heartbeat, a quiet promise kept. Behind them, the green vine that had started on a cracked windowsill now climbed the palace walls in lush spirals, blooming with tiny white flowers no one had seen in generations. The blight was gone, and so, finally, was the shadow between them. They were home. Where are you watching from? Let's meet in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts. And if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people hear this story.